Today is day 6 of the Practical Poetics studying sessions. Today, man, I'm glad I'm doing this because today I do not want to work. I will say that. However, I think it's because of dread, because the Carson text was such a bummer yesterday. Remembering. So today I will finish the Carson text and then I will move on to the Ellen Bryant Voigt text, Messenger. This text is, this collection is over 200 pages long. Yeah, 237. So I'm going to get through these two readings and then see how I feel, because the only other reading I have left is the Emily Dickinson collection, which I mentioned I might just like pick and choose which ones I want to read on that. Hobbs is in a location that he should not be in. Hobbs, get down, get down, get down, get down. Stinker. And yeah, so we're gonna see how it goes from there. You'll notice I have you in a different location today. I lowered my chair last night and I think I may have broken it. So we are perpetually at the lower state, not at the higher state. And yeah, we'll get started. It's been about an hour. It is almost 10:15, 10:13, and I've read to page 85. Something that's really interesting about this collection so far is how much control Voigt has over her syntax in the line. Because when I read a collection of poems, I am taking my time, but I tend to read a little faster than when I'm reading theory. That being said, I did speed read through Carson this morning because I was high-key sick of reading Carson. But Voigt, I approached the poems in the same way as I had been going with the Carson text, and her control over the line and the diction and the structure and the space, the caesuras. I mean, there's not a whole lot of inline caesuras, spare like a comma or punctuation here and there, but she line breaks in ways that make the reader slow down. So that was really interesting. Because I don't think I've actually read Voigt. I've read her craft texts. One of the books that I'll read later in this series is called The Art of Syntax. That makes sense now because I'm totally fascinated by her syntax. But I read The Art of Syntax a few years ago and I loved it, and I put it on this list for a craft text as well because it was just a really good book. But it's really interesting to notice that about Voigt in her collections. And this is, so Messenger is a collection of poems throughout Voigt's publications. So there are multiple poems from multiple collections in Messenger. So I've read through about 3 excerpts from 3 different collections so far. And yeah, I am going to take a break. I am going to eat something. And then I'm going to head to the university. I need to take care of some tax documentation. So annoying. And then I'm going to go to the gym. And hopefully, I'm pretty low energy this morning. So I'm hoping that after the gym, I will be in higher spirits. I really think that Carson kind of ruined my mood from yesterday on. It was just such a depressing text. Again, I will restate that I think everyone should read that text and be warned, it is not a happy text. But yeah, so we're gonna pause here. Good afternoon. It is now 3:15, so I've been gone for quite a while. I went to the gym. My workout was super hard. This whole week has been so hard, and that's okay. My instructor last night said that this was kind of like a one-time week, kind of like a PR week, which is great. It's good to figure out, where you're at, and then we're going back to our regular schedule this next week, which is relieving, because I don't know if I could do this week repeatedly. F45 does 4 weeks of the same type of thing, and then they move to a different set of workouts. But as I have kind of settled in, obviously, I'm showered, relieved, I don't know what I was going to say, but I have prepared I'm really trying hard not to say that word. I have prepared dinner. It is currently in the fridge marinating. And I think that I'm going to do some more reading on Voigt. And I think I'm only going to read until 4 because I'm pretty burned out, actually, after this week, which was a similar result to last week where I read throughout the entire week, and then on the weekend, I was just totally spent. However, I did read last weekend, so I've been doing this consistently for 2 weeks. And with that being said, I will be completing my notes over the weekend. However, I don't know if I'm going to film that. So if you guys do want to check in on the weekend, I can do that, but I think I might just complete my notes, because really it's just me sitting in front of my computer with my book open, typing through, the summaries, what I found interesting, paragraphs that helped comprehension of each chapter. Like theory, I go chapter by chapter. Poetics, I do collection by collection. And then, so for theory, I do summaries, I highlight words I don't know, then I look those words up, and then I do a section on paragraphs from each chapter that help explain the argument of each chapter. And then the next section is lines or paragraphs that I could use in my own argument for each chapter. And then I do some critical thinking to figure out who is connecting to who, which poets are connecting to which theorists, and each individual chapter and how they're connecting. And then I have a little section that suggests further readings. So in the Carson text I don't remember the text that she mentioned, so I'm going to have to, as I do my notes, I'm going to have to highlight it. But there's this other person she mentioned who studied mushrooms, and that just sounds so fascinating to me. So I want to write that down as an additional text to check out. And then on the poetic collections, I do a summary, I do the vocabulary, and then I isolate poems that stuck out to me, and then I isolate poems that could be utilized in my exam. And then I do the same connections, like which theories they're connecting to, how and why they're connecting, and kind of just like an analysis. Like I do a mini analysis of everything that I'm reading in my notes, which means they're extensive. I have maybe, well, at this point, I think it's probably like 11 books in there. Not including, I haven't finished the notes, the theory notes on the Bates book and the craft texts. I have 2 craft texts. I have 2 theory texts now because I finished the Carson. And then 7 or 8 poetry collections that I need to catch up on in notes. And without those in there, my notes document with, I think it's maybe 12 or 13 collections, is already 46 pages long. So it's going to be huge. It's going to be an enormous document. It's not uncommon for people who are doing these types of exams to have between like 350 to 500 pages of notes. But the idea is that if you do it electronically, so the exam is an open book test, right? So you can use the documents that you have. And so if you do it electronically and you are looking for a reference somewhere, then you can just, Control F and find it in the document. So it utilizes time a little bit better because it's a timed exam. It starts on Friday at 4:30, I think, 4:30 or 5 p.m. and then ends the following Monday at 9 a.m. Like you have to have it in by 9 a.m. Which is, I did it last year and it was okay. But I literally thought that my sits bones were going to burst through my skin because I was so tired of sitting. And I think I left my house once on Saturday and once on Sunday. I had already pre-made all of my meals. I had already done everything so I could just sit at my desk and answer the questions and finish the exam. So it's pretty intense. All that to say, I am tired. I am a little burned out from this week. Carson really sucked my soul right out my lips. And that's okay because now I have her in my back pocket. I can reference her. I understand the science behind what she was researching. She pulls in poetry really lovely. Not as much, but that's what I'm supposed to do, right? So, which is fine. But yeah, she did a really good job. A really, really brilliant woman. It's too bad that we lost her sooner than we should have. Okay, all that to say, I'm going to read Voigt for 38 minutes. Voigt. I did skip around throughout the text and I marked, there's 2 sections in here, 2 collections that she has that I'm going to return to. I think those collections would fit very nicely within what I am studying. She does some really cool things in here. I didn't know how sonatical she was. She writes a lot of sonnets. She's very lyrical. And that was really cool to read. It also moved me back into, so something about poetry is if you start reading a lot of sonnets, you start seeing you see the scansion regardless. Scansion is the stressed and unstressed syllables that are happening within the sonnet, and generally sonnets, so the Shakespearean sonnet is written in iambic pentameter, right? And Voigt moves between variations of Shakespearean sonnet and the Petrarchan sonnet, which is the Italian sonnet. And if I read a lot of sonnets, I start reading in meter, which means I hear every, like, stressor. So, which is, it's actually pretty cool when that happens. But all that to say, I really enjoyed the Voigt, and I am going to call it for the day. This is a shorter video, so that's all good and dandy. I wanted to point this out. So I had to cut a portion of this film earlier because as I was filming it, like I was playing it back to do edits, and I noticed that my credit card was sitting right in the corner, and you could, if you like paused the video, you could definitely make out numbers. So I was like, whoops. And so there's not an in-depth explanation on the rest of the Carson text because I had to delete it. But basically, the rest of the Carson text discussed more of the same, of how the insecticides and pesticides wiped out all of the weak in a certain insect species, but those who survived, they were the strong, right? They were dominant. And then dominant insects were mating with other dominant insects, and then that they would breed resilient offspring, which is why those insects became so resilient towards the toxins and the poisons that they were using to eradicate them. And then the last chapter goes into how, like, alternative ways to solve insect problems, which this morning I talked a lot about how much I hate mosquitoes. I hate mosquitoes. And mosquitoes were a part of what she was talking about because they are disease transmitters, you know? Like here in Oklahoma, we have, I think there's a slight risk of West Nile. There's a slight risk of, I don't remember the other diseases. I looked it up. There's like a whole list of diseases you can get from a mosquito bite. And really, the only purpose of the mosquito, like the only thing that the mosquito does for the ecosystem is provide food for other larger insects, but those larger insects are already eating other things too. So that is one species where if we could eradicate entirely the mosquito population without the use of chemical warfare, that would be pretty awesome because they're useless. They're totally useless. Like even the black fly has a purpose, you know? They're annoying, but they're a part of the decomposing stage of a biome. And mosquitoes just spread disease and are annoying. And I'm highly allergic to the mosquitoes down here. The mosquitoes down here are huge. They are way bigger than the mosquitoes up in the north. And that is also annoying because I get allergic reactions. But all that to say, that's basically the rest of Carson summarized. The last chapter, I didn't finish summarizing that. She goes over how the research they've done is sterilizing male insects and then re-releasing them out into the wild to mate with the females, so then they breed themselves into extinction, which they do that through X-ray, which I thought was pretty cool. And then the other way to do that is to introduce a bacteria that naturally goes after a pest, but other animals in that biome, in that ecosystem, are resilient or it doesn't affect them at all. So those were two of the ways that she suggested to handle pest invasions instead of releasing a bunch of really toxic chemicals that affect the human population and our livestock and our natures, our birds, and our domestic pets and, you know, X, Y, and Z. And I think that's about it. I do want to spend just a minute. I have one of my followers, one of my mystery followers, he contacted me as one of my friends back in Utah. His name is Ryan. Thank you so much for subscribing, and I'm happy to see you here. And yeah, I would just encourage all of my subscribers, which I have 8 now. I think I had 8 yesterday, but I'm still very excited about it. If I was thinking about this, I was like, man, if I get to 100 subscribers, I'll do a little lottery. I'll figure out how to do that, and then I'll buy one of you a coffee or something. So, but that's 100 subscribers, if people are interested in this. And yeah, I'm gonna take, I said it again, that freaking word. I wish I could just like delete it from my brain. Anyway, I'm gonna take the rest of the evening off. Rachel Carson really did me in this week. I do stand by, I hope that I didn't repeat this in a previous clip, but if I did, I can't remember what I said in the clip that I had to delete, you know? But I do think that Carson is necessary for like every person in the 21st century to read. I think that she should be an essential read. I think that she should come back into the classrooms. Oh, maybe I said this yesterday, but everything she has to say can still be applied to the 21st century because we're in a different age, a different area of science and chemical production. Like the big thing maybe 10 years ago were GMOs, which, you know, Monsanto is still doing their thing. I'm sure we all remember the Monsanto issues. And I always think about this, like whenever I leave America and go to Europe, I've been to all over Europe. I've been to Australia, New Zealand, I've been to Indonesia, and the food in those locations always taste better and make me feel better than American food. And I just think that that is such an indication that the food we're eating here is awful and is not healthy for the American population. But all that to say, I could go off on that rant for a very long time. So I am going to stop here. I am going to make myself dinner. I'm very excited about my dinner tonight. This weekend, I am going to do my note-taking. Oh, I think this may have been part of the deletion. I don't remember if I went over notes. Maybe I did that before. This is, like, deletion is really hard. So that's good to know. That's good for me to know. I need to figure out what I've deleted so I don't miss those points that I want to discuss later on. Learning, always learning. But I'm going to do my notes this weekend. I finished everything other than the Dickinson, and again, I read Dickinson a few years ago, so I can just kind of parse through and figure out the poems I want to pull out. And yeah, thanks for being here this week with me. I will see you guys. If I film something, I'll see you. Well, I won't see you, but you'll see me maybe sometime this weekend. But if I don't, then I'll be back on Monday. Have a great weekend. This concludes part 6.